welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelley Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today, we are excited to welcome Danielle Winkelman to the show. Danielle Winkelman is a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner, an associate certified dog behavior consultant, a fear-free certified professional, and a Puppy Start Right instructor. After serving in the military as an Army medic, Danielle graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology from the University of North Carolina. Her career with animals began in shelters and sanctuaries, then moved into veterinary medicine, which led her to work with veterinary behaviorists at Behavior Vets, the Veterinary Behavior Center, and Blue Ridge Veterinary Behavior. While in Colorado, she feels fortunate to have been at Humane Society of Boulder Valley doing behavior modification with shelter animals and to have volunteered taking behavior data at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. Recently returned to the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, she owns Intrepid Animal Learning, doing board and train for behaviorally sensitive dogs, private consultations for all species, and workshops for professionals and guardians. She is passionate about continuing education and is a graduate of Dr. Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals, the Aggression in Dogs Master Course, and Resolving Fear Issues in Horses. She attends conferences every year and is a proud member of Animal Training Academy and Thrive. Danielle shares her home with another human, 2 huskies, and I told you I didn't have any problems with pronunciations in the bio, but what is this here? 2 Maremma? Okay.
Maremmas, yeah.
Great. I should have just gone with it. I had it there, I think.
Yeah.
Two Maremma livestock guardians, 1 cat, a flock of chickens, turkeys, and peacocks, as well as 3 Mustangs and a flock of sheep. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm excited to have you. That's quite an eclectic group you share your home with, isn't it?
It is. And it's awesome having the variety.
Yeah, I bet. And I know this isn't our... we'll get started with the other questions in just a second here, but you just... As I was reading all the different animals that you have, it just struck me again. And I know that we've talked about this before, but you just moved across the country with all of those animals, didn't you?
Not quite all of them. We moved with about 30 fowl, so the chickens, turkeys, and peacocks, and then 2 horses, 2 dogs, and a cat.
Wow. I'm sure that was quite the unique trip.
It was. The trip fortunately went really well, and all the animals were great. The horses, I was a little bit afraid would decide they didn't want to load up to be driven around all day, but they actually got better and better each day. So they were amazing. Of course, a lot of worry and preparation went into it. We had to do a lot of testing and health certificates and that sort of thing to get them across the country. But that part went off pretty easily.
Well, good. I'm glad that it did go off pretty easily for you and for the animals. Well, again, I'm super excited to have you here with us today, and I would love it if you would start us out by just telling us a little bit about your story and how you came to work with animals.
Sure, I'll expound upon my bio a bit. I feel really lucky that two things are true about me. And the first is that I've always worked with animals. My first real jobs were in animal shelters and sanctuaries. And I can say, I've had my whole working experiences with animals. And then the second is that I'm not a crossover trainer. I started with positive reinforcement, and I was very fortunate that those first clinics that I worked at were very behavior focused, low stress handling, and really focused on puppy socialization, that sort of thing. So I had a good start from the beginning and some good mentors that encouraged me to continue investigating behavior. And when I was working in animal hospitals, that was where I wanted to be, because as many of us, I'm listening to this podcast, have, I'm told that since I could talk, I said I wanted to be an animal doctor. And so I worked hard to get into veterinary medicine, starting off as an assistant and a technician, going to undergrad with that in mind, and just found that all of my friends that were vets kind of talked me out of it. they didn't think it was necessarily a great career choice, a lot of financial reasons here in the US, but and it also, I was kind of told that behavior wasn't really a career choice unless you wanted to be a professor or just kind of teaching it theoretically. So I'm really grateful that when I went to Colorado, I found an opening at Behavior Vets where I could kind of merge my two passions for medicine and the behavior, and kind of took off there full time doing behavior with that kind of veterinary lens and determining all the medical contributors. And it is I'm so grateful for that, because it has been just what I needed, and I'm very happy, and certainly making a whole life out of behavior. And so I worked in Colorado, worked for the board certified vet behaviorist in the shelter, and then volunteered at the zoo, and just love doing all of that. And recently, as of this year, moved back to North Carolina near Asheville, and we've got 32 acres and have already started accumulating more animals. And so my days now are surrounded by animals. I do some gardening. We've got a little farm stand where we sell eggs and produce and that sort of thing. But I work with my own animals and do consults working with people virtually or in person. And then the board and train aspect are people coming here for workshops and opportunities to practice training lambs and things like that. It's all a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about lots of the things that you were just sharing about. But right now, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about your experience in Colorado when you were working for, I think you said, a board certified veterinary behaviorist. Is that right? Did you say that?
Yes, that's right. I worked with Dr. Christensen at Behavior Vets first, and then at the Veterinary Behavior Center, Dr. Fagan. And so I started off as a technician there, taking a lot of notes, restraining for blood draws, that sort of thing as a technician. And quickly, it was kind of always our goal to have me be a veterinary behavior technician and therapist. So seeing cases and doing the behavior modification, coaching people through the training and techniques that they need to improve behavior. But it's the deep end of the pool of behavior issues, working with clients. That we were seeing all of the most severe cases, people that are at the end of their ropes. And so I learned quickly how to work with aggression and anxiety, and definitely the human aspect of it was a big part of lots of crying in the rooms and things like that. So supporting humans has been something that it's a piece that I've become really passionate about. And of course, we do this because we love animals, but I have really embraced the piece of needing to work with the human component as well.
Yeah, I've heard, I can't remember who I first heard say this, but I've definitely heard several people say, every animal that we work with comes attached to a human in one way or another. So it is really important that we learn, I think, to work with people as well. And I could see where working with folks who were going to see a veterinary behaviorist, those would be kind of high emotion times, I would think, for a lot of people. You are, I think you said, kind of at the end of your rope a lot of times when you make your way to a veterinary behaviorist.
Yes, exactly. And hopefully that won't be the way forever. We think of it as kind of a gold standard for behavior cases, but hopefully we'll have a culture moving forward where it's a more proactive choice. But absolutely, right now it's often people's last choice, or their last option after they've been through a lot of other things. And so there is a lot of emotional baggage and high stakes. And working with animals, particularly on the aggressive spectrum, something that I don't think is talked about a lot, but it happens in veterinary medicine and working in shelters too, is the cortisol or stress response of yourself when you have a dog that's barking at you or has a bite history that you're working closely with. So it's a very interesting line of work that, sometimes there's a bit of adrenaline that goes along with it, but you are working really hard to support the other person in the room and try not to show fear and know that you're communicating that you're not really afraid of their animal. You want them to just feel comfortable and you don't want to provoke that fear. And just because you're moving slowly doesn't mean that you are judging them or anything like that.
And through your work, with the veterinary behaviorist and those people and animals who you were working with, did you learn some healthy coping strategies for yourself to deal with that stress that you're talking about? The increased cortisol happening all the time and all of that?
That's a great question. I think it's a continual work in progress. I have learned the value of that piece of it, and that allows me to limit the number of cases I might see in a day or the number of new families I'm meeting with over a week's time, those sort of things. And knowing that just because you're only spending an hour with them, it's not all happy. So your emotional bandwidth might be limited on the number of families that you can meet with, where you're playing a bit of a therapist or trying not to be in that role. Having community, now that I am a business owner and I do still sometimes work with teams, especially as a contract employee for some of these other businesses. And I love that, having people that understand and that you can collaborate with is really helpful for me personally. So I've created some communities kind of everywhere I've gone with other professionals and colleagues that we can get together and talk about work, and also have times where we're just socializing and kind of trying to leave that behind or do fun things that we can all appreciate, that focus on the fun aspects of training and doing what we love.
Yeah, and it's really interesting thinking back to your bio and also thinking back to some of the things that you started with talking about that you have going on on your property now. It does sound like you have a really diverse background, and while you've done a lot of work with complex behavior cases, it sounds like you also balance that out with maybe doing some things with puppies and work on your farm as well. Could you share a little bit about some of the goals that you have with the animals who you're going to be working with on your farm? I know that I think it was in ATA recently, somewhere on the internet. I saw a photo. It was in ATA. I saw a photo of a young person working with an animal on your farm, and I don't know if that is part of if young people training and working with animals is a goal that you have for your farm
Yeah.
or what goals you do have. Yeah, you tell us. Let me shut up and you tell us.
Well, my main goals are having good welfare for everybody. That's number one. And some of that is training. A lot of it is behavior involved, even if we don't think of it as formal training, like husbandry, even as far as I don't do a lot of formal training with my birds these days, but I do have a goal of allowing them or them allowing us to handle them and weigh them and do kind of just wellness checks if as needed. And then for the sheep and the horses, making sure that they can understand different types of fencing so that we can get them out on pasture and have very natural lives and routines. Those things are kind of forefront. But to answer your question, yes, I want one of the reasons I have the sheep is as an opportunity for other humans to practice training skills. And so that is one of the examples of an experience that made me very happy. It's very reinforcing for me is having an 11-year-old come over and do kind of a little camp with me. Primarily, her goal was to be able to prepare for having a horse of her own. And so we did, handling, lead rope, walking, grooming, that sort of things with the horses. But we also focused on some training with the horses, and the sheep are a really great kind of intermediary where they're much smaller, they're not as intimidating, but you're delivering similar reinforcers and working on some of the same kind of behaviors. So I can't take credit for all of her training skills because she was actually referred to me by another member of ATA to work on these things. But the lamb that you saw in some of the photos, which I can supply some photos and videos for the show notes, he is a ram lamb from this year and hadn't received any formal training before the week that she was here. And the last day I gave her some free time to kind of choose whatever she wanted to work on. And she decided to work with him. She'd only done 2 or 3 sessions with him before, but and target training is one of the things that we had worked on. But for her choice was that she taught him how to do a spin, and it only took her about 15 minutes to do it. She created the training plan herself, and I was very proud of her, and just so much fun to see that. Proud of the sheep, and he's been asking for more training and attention ever since then.
That's wonderful. Do you think that young woman will be back?
I hope so. I hope to stay in touch. Our timing was not as good as I would like as far as she was staying in my area for the summer and actually went back to the other side of the state. So they may visit. And again, I hope that they stay in touch, but I don't know if she'll be able to come back regularly or in person. But that is something I would like to be able to offer more opportunities for kids to learn about animals in general, certainly training. It's been a dream of mine to be able to offer positive reinforcement training for kids and humans of all types, especially vulnerable populations, veterans, things like that, being able to offer them an opportunity to work with animals in a positive reinforcement contingency as a way to help them kind of navigate their world a little bit differently. So those are things that as we develop this property, I certainly have as goals.
Well, that's exciting. And I'll be looking forward to seeing how you develop and grow in that area. How long have you been at the new property?
We moved about 5 months ago now.
Yeah. So I would say in 5 months, you've already you've already made active progress in that direction of helping expand positive reinforcement training to young people. So I'm sure that you're going to grow even more in that area and serving all those other populations that you were just sharing about. That's wonderful. And so remind us again, what all do you have going on kind of service wise with Intrepid Animal Learning? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So my kind of niche service is the board and train for behaviorally sensitive dogs. So I have small cabins for dogs where they have indoor-outdoor runs. So if they need to be kind of if we need to use hands-off management, we can. I can take care of all of their needs until or if they get comfortable enough to go for walks or go out into a larger area or do some, hands-on training. And they're also isolated from other dogs, other animals, and we implement visual barriers, noise buffers, everything that we can to kind of make their stay more comfortable. And then I also do private consultations for any species. Dogs and cats are what most people bring to me, but I obviously love working with horses. I'm going to be working with a vet with a cow soon, I think. And so I love working with different species and seeing how people interact with them. So I can do that virtually or in person locally. And then the kind of expanding thing is workshops and trainings for either professionals, and hoping to host a lamb training kind of workshop opportunity for dog trainers in our area later this year. And then for guardians, one thing that's high on my list is building a cabin or an area here on the property where humans can stay. So I see a need for doing kind of board and train for the client and the pet at the same time. So I'm fortunate to live in a vacation destination. I'm hoping people would be interested in coming to stay on a farm in the mountains and bring their dog or their pet out and do kind of I don't want to say boot camp, that has the wrong connotations, but, a jump start on their training and be able to really focus on that and have some momentum going forward.
Wow, that's a great idea. I could see people really enjoying that and that being a super helpful service for people. So what a great idea. For the board and trains, I'm curious, what are do you have some kind of favorite things to work on with dogs who board and train with you, or things that you find I really have a lot of success working on this type of issue with board and train, mm-hmm. or is it a little more general than that for you?
My favorites are cooperative care and handling type things. And one of the reasons is because when working on allowing the animal to opt in or say no, I find that it kind of bleeds over to other areas. So often the cases I'm working with are really complex, and I might be able to work with them on veterinary handling, but they also have resource guarding or whatever kind of labels we might put on them that they might bite or get aggressive in a multiple situations. And so I find that teaching them that they can be a lot more subtle with their communications, and I'm sure a big part of it is teaching the clients as well, it can be helpful in some of those other arenas that we're not directly working on. So that I love that aspect of handling and husbandry care. I also love the dogs who are nervous enough about new people that they really don't have other options for boarding. Often when they come to me, I can help them feel comfortable enough that they are soliciting attention from me. And it's really reinforcing to me, but it's also really helpful for their guardians just to see what is possible and what, if they can have somebody else in their inner circle.
Yeah, thank you. I can see where both of those things would be really reinforcing and also really helpful for the animals you're working with and the humans who they live with. I'm curious too about that cow that you're going to be working with. You said you're going to be working with a veterinarian and a cow, I think. What kinds of things will you be doing with the cow?
I don't have much details on that yet, but I'll have to share in ATA.
Yeah, I'll be really excited to learn more about that. I know there have been some other folks sharing recently about some cow husbandry work and such in ATA. So it'll be exciting to see more of that. Well, thank you for sharing everything so far. We usually ask this near the end, and I may ask again, but since you've just talked about all of your services and mentioned that you have like in person and virtual and that sort of thing, would you mind sharing with everybody? And we'll link to this in the show notes too, but just kind of sharing with everybody how they could reach out to you and get in touch if they were interested in learning more about working with you.
Absolutely. So my website is intrepidanimallearning.com, and I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. If you're really more interested in just the farm stuff, Intrepid Acres is the name of the farm, and we're on social media with that.
I did not know you were on social media with that. So I'm writing that down right now so I can follow immediately after the recording because I'm definitely interested in the farm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we will link to that in the show notes too so folks can get in touch with you and so they can follow you on Intrepid Farms and also your other work. Could you share with us now about some more training specific situations? Could you talk to us about a recent training challenge that you've experienced and maybe talk us through kind of how you worked through it or are working through it and some things that you learned from it?
Yeah, so this is my moment to get vulnerable. Recently, when working with my newest Mustang, who came to me from the holding facility. So I know New Zealand has some horses that are legitimately untouched when you get them, but here in the US, as wild a horse as you can get, really. He came directly to me, and actually very fortunate that he wasn't afraid of people, but obviously hadn't learned to live in our world and hadn't been trained before. So during one session, I was actually working in protected contact, but working on just having him touch a halter with his nose and feeding him pellets out of my hand. And I would label him as frustrated, I think is what happened in that moment. When taking food from my hand, aggressively went for the food and bit my finger. And I don't think he was trying to bite me. I think that my little tiny finger slipped in his mouth, but it really hurt. And looking back, of course, I have all of the imposter syndrome and could see where it was going wrong and that I moved to asking for hand feeding and a new behavior too soon. But I came away from that with some fear of being bitten and of the situation. And it really kind of highlighted a couple of things for me. And one is how helpful it can be to have, even as a professional, another set of eyes on your training and a coach to help cheer you on and keep you accountable. I know it is much harder for me to work with my own animals often than other people's. And it's one of the reasons I love working with other professionals is because I think there's a stigma and it's really hard for people to be vulnerable, but I like being able to be there and not judging and knowing where they're coming from. I think there's some situations in my past where if I could do it over again, I would hire somebody, but I didn't. I felt like I should have been able to handle it myself. So I love when people are brave enough to come to me and ask for my opinion or just help troubleshooting on things as a sounding board. I don't necessarily know more than they do, but having another person is often really helpful. And then the other aspect that it really brought up for me is that I often work with so many clients who are afraid or anxious about the situations they find themselves in with their animals. And it seems like a lot of them have been told or been given the impression that their anxiety or their fear is, if not causing the problem, at least contributing to it. And while, there may be pieces of that are true, our animals are very perceptive and they may be getting cues from us of when there's another dog or something to be worried about. That doesn't mean we can't work around it. We want to give our clients tools and strategies to help them feel more comfortable, but it also is okay if they're afraid. And so that's what I was experiencing is when I came back to working with that horse, it seemed as though I was a lot more afraid than he was. And so working on just putting my hand there with food, it was a bit of a leap of faith. And of course I did some work back up to it, but that is it was really more mental and emotional for me of coming back to that situation. And I broke it down and we've had great success since then, but just noticing how I was feeling about it. And again, it seemed like he was fine. He was happy to take food and very relaxed. But for me, I had to work in that moment on building that trust back and getting some relaxation and comfort. So that's how I dealt with it. But it was just something that gave me a lot of compassion for people that I work with.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being vulnerable and bravely sharing that story with us. And second of all, I can 100% relate to everything that you just said. And I think it's interesting that the two different things that you mentioned, that kind of two big learning takeaways, I guess, as far as how helpful it can be to have a helper, even as a professional, helping you work through a behavior challenge. And then the other one, as far as being how our emotions might or might not impact a specific training situation. It seems like those two things are really, there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
Do you think so?
Sure. Yes, now that you pointed out.
Yeah, because I know that for myself, I can think of an issue that I have had with one of my dogs, Miha, and her veterinary care, and it is an extremely it's fraught with emotion for both of us, right? For both my dog and myself, and I ended up seeking professional help with that, and I think that many things make the professional help helpful. But for me, I think one of the things is helping somebody to kind of step outside of that, well, maybe not step outside of that emotion, but to have somebody who is outside of that emotion looking at the picture for you and helping you through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It can be really hard, I think, for ourselves or our clients or anybody when we're in a situation that's emotional for us to see things objectively. So having an objective third party, I think, can be really helpful. So you did reach out for help on that particular issue. Is that right?
This particular issue, I didn't have anybody kind of privately. I kind of looked at what other people had written and really just tried to step out as much as possible of my own. I had it on video. I'm not going to share that video. It's actually very boring. It doesn't look like much, but I knew the moment it happened of like, oh, I could have done things differently. And so, in Care and Pryor Academy, they talked to us a lot about the importance of taking video of training. And I know we all in ATA do that so we can share with others, but that is one way of, if you're not there yet with having somebody else, just having video on it, and then you can kind of at least look in retrospect and outside of the moment at what you did and what you might change. So that's how I handled that, because it seemed very obvious to me.
Yeah, and that's a great point, too, because not everybody always at every moment in time has the resources necessarily to hire another professional to help. But video is a really great way for us to help step back and be a little objective ourselves, too. So great point there. You mentioned when you talked about sometimes people suggest that that our emotions impact the behavior of our animals or the animals who we're working with. And I think you mentioned that there were things that we could do about that, or kind of ways that we could address that. So I'm wondering if you were working with somebody and they had a problem. I'll just give an example, but you could go with something different if you wanted. But if you know they had a dog who was quote unquote reactive on leash, and they were barking their head off every time they saw another dog. And every time the person saw the dog, they tightened the leash and maybe they said a certain thing. And then the dog started barking. Like you noticed that the person's anxiety and behavior was actually setting the dog off. How can you think of like what kinds of things that you might do to help navigate that situation when you might not be able to help the person not feel nervous? What might you do in the moment to help them navigate that?
Absolutely. That's such a common type of case I see. So the first thing I would do is give the client permission to take a break from those situations. And in most cases, there is something different that can be done. If they have a fenced yard, they might not even need to be going for walks or exposing their dog to those triggers and the stimuli that's stressing them. And the other important thing is just giving them something else to do in the moment. And usually that's feeding treats or, giving them a cue. And so often practicing those things ahead of time. So if we were doing pattern games or things like that, we might give them an opportunity to practice in a place where they feel comfortable. And that's similar to the strategies I use for myself of just breaking down the components and practicing getting comfortable with just feeding that horse and building up confidence and knowing that we had that language together. So that is really helpful. And so that when they're in the moment, not only does the animal know what to do, but the human partner knows what they should be doing as well. And then from there, it's often just that confidence comes naturally and they're happy emotions. And hopefully it's reinforcing for everybody. And everybody starts to change their emotions and feel better and have behaviors that cooperate well with one another.
Yeah, great. So I think what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think kind of what I'm hearing you say is that you would help the humans to build alternate behaviors to fluency in much the same way that you would be working with the non-human animal to build behaviors that they could offer in those situations instead of the ones that are associated with anxiousness.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay. Awesome. And it sounded like you said in there too, that you were able to use some of those same strategies on yourself when you started working with that horse again. Is that right? Kind of.
Yes, exactly. Just very simple, breaking it down, practicing in a lower stress situation. And we're a lot more comfortable now.
Good. I'm very glad to hear that. Could you share with us now something that you find that you are proud of, a training situation that you are proud of and or that you find reinforcing?
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier about the 11-year-old coming, and I think that that's a big one on my list recently. It's fresh for me, but also getting a chance to do something different and influencing, someone else. It was reinforcing to work with my animals in that way, but also having a human learner who was impacted and grateful, and was just a lot of fun. I can talk about a board and train that was reinforcing and made me feel proud. So one of my most recent cases is a dog that had received a lot of training, and some of it is in line with what I would recommend. Some of it wasn't, but the clients were just reaching for whatever they felt was effective and could get them improvement in whatever way they were measuring that. And so the behaviors that they were most concerned about was some barking and air snapping, I think potentially some lower level non-skin breaking bites to visitors coming in the house. And so they were getting married and needed somebody to take care of their dog while their family was visiting and while they were actually getting married. They were taking the dog with them on the honeymoon, which is great. But so it was a perfect opportunity for this pup to come to me. And we weren't sure. I had done a couple of in-home visits with them, just coaching them on how to practice these things in their home. And are some other behaviors like what we might label reactivity to other dogs, that sort of things that they had been working on. But the first time she came to my property was when she was being dropped off for boarding. And it was one of those cases that within 24 hours, she was soliciting attention from me. And I do think some of this is just that, her people are gone. I'm the friendly face, and she doesn't have to worry about the things that are often associated with being at home. And, there are all these cues in the environment for those behaviors that they have found bothersome. So I do think just being in a different environment is hugely helpful for the board and train setup. But also, a lot of these dogs have never encountered somebody who is reading their body language and giving them space and able to, even if she wants to solicit attention, giving her plenty of freedom to take space, and that every interaction she's having me is having a positive outcome. She's getting treats, getting reinforced for behavior she's doing. And we did work on specific things like mat training and relaxation. She also had some separation related distress, which is always hard to combine with stranger danger. But this family was very happy to see her opening up to somebody else. And I was really happy to be able to provide the service, especially kind of the timing made it really something that they needed. They were mostly interested in having a safe place for their dog to stay, but we were able to make a lot of progress with not only having her be able to get her harness on by a new person, things that are really kind of intimate. But I was able to start introducing her to my partner and working on a structured greeting protocol and things like that were kind of above and beyond what we were even expecting. So that was a cool outcome for that story.
Yeah, that's amazing. I could see how that would be super reinforcing for multiple reasons. And for both you and for the people, I'm sure they just loved that she was able to be comfortable during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only for their long-term goals, but just having her be happy and enriched while they were busy doing other things.
Yeah. So that's really interesting what you bring up about all the, when the dog moves from their home to a completely different environment, like a board and train environment with you, that all of the cues for, or at least a lot of, if not all of the cues for a lot of those quote unquote undesirable behaviors aren't there anymore. And so it sounds like it gives you kind of a little bit of an in to begin for other behaviors to emerge and for you to begin reinforcing some of those other behaviors. And like with this dog, you were able to have a lot of success. It sounds like really quickly. I'm curious about the process of going back then to that other environment. I see you smiling and nodding, so you know where I'm going with this, I think. Can you share a little bit?
It's a question I get a lot, and one of the criticisms of board and train, and it's fair that.
And I don't mean it as a criticism at all. No. I'm just I'm guessing that I'm asking it from a place of imagining that you've got a strategy in place here to kind of help with that.
Interestingly, when I started doing board and train for basically veterinary behavior patients, was kind of my client base, I wasn't thinking about that very much, and it didn't seem to be a huge factor. I think part of it is that I don't advertise as that board and train is going to fix anything. It's a jump start. It's something to do while you're traveling anyway. And so there's follow-up. I do have transfer sessions that we work through. But I also think part of it is just different techniques are used. I might have more trouble, I think, with the transferring back to the home environment if we were working on something that the client had already been working on, like just throwing an example, cooperative care. If they had been working on drugs, bucket game, or something specific that they had done and been struggling with, and then came to me and I continue to work on it, when they went back home trying to do the exact same thing, they might run into those same problems. But often I'm introducing that cooperative care for the first time. So they're actually taking some of that context, whether it's a bucket or a mat or, a tool or just a new setup for the training. They're taking that home with them. And so they're kind of starting fresh. So yes, some of the same things are going to be present, but the way they're addressing it is very different, and that changes a lot of the context and the environment. So that was kind of what I was running into the beginning. It wasn't as much of a concern as I might now think it would be. And then now I do take some measures to address that. And often I am trained to get the client to send an object that we can kind of work around. So the mat training is something I do use a little bit more for board and train than I might if I was just doing private, and not necessarily in the way that you might think of with a lot of board and trains, but just that it's an object that is in the environment that can kind of anchor those behaviors. I've been playing around with the idea of having a scent component. So maybe having like a signature essential oil mix that can be associated with training sessions. So it's definitely something that's on my mind, but I've been really successful with being able to send these behaviors home and have the client continue working on them and be successful.
That's great. And as I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking of, say, you are working with a board and train client on some sort of cooperative care work that they've never worked on before, and you send a dog home, and now a harness can be put on a dog really easily, or with the dog, cooperating in a really simple way that the people maybe never could have done before or never would have thought was possible before. That just the success, experiencing that success might make them more open to using the same kind of methods or seeing where those methods might apply to other behaviors as well. Do you think that might be the case?
Yes. And along those lines, I think one of the most important things that I offer with the board and train, an opportunity to do some extended training with a professional, is showing guardians what their animal can do, how smart they are. And if that human animal bond has been damaged, sometimes that can work wonders of just, even if they never see this again, or if it doesn't transfer to home, knowing that they were able to do it would make a difference in their hope and their bond and their attachment to the animal. So yes, absolutely. Just seeing success, certainly. And sometimes it is setting them up with a new harness or a new type of leash, like a long line or something, just so that it is a bit different whenever they take it home.
Well, I just love that you're offering board and train, and it sounds like you have a wonderful environment to offer it in now. I'm sure you did before, but it sounds like you have a really amazing environment to offer it in now. And I think that a lot of times board and trains are associated with maybe a more punitive kind of types of trainings. And so I really thank you for being a positive reinforcement-based animal trainer offering board and trains, because it's a needed service for folks like those folks who you were talking about who were getting married and needed somewhere for their dog to be able to go and also build some new skills while they were there. So I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be able to offer it.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us today so far. I would like to ask you now, before we wrap up, if there's anything that I have not asked you about that you would like to share about, whether it's something specific, animal or training related, or if you have anything coming up that you want folks to know about, just anything that you would like the opportunity to share about that I haven't asked about.
You've given me an opportunity to do a lot of passion talking and bring up some of my, most favorite things. So I appreciate that. Um, I'm in a place of transition still and am open to new things. And so kind of with the offerings locally and even virtually, if there's something that somebody thinks I might have an opportunity to teach or give them an opportunity to learn, please reach out. I think that's the bottom line now is I am flexible and just really passionate about teaching people. And so if it were wanting to do some of that gardening therapy in conjunction with animal training or just petting sheep or bouncing off ideas about how to work with aggressive roosters, those sort of things, I am open to ideas in creating content or opportunities where people can talk about the things that they love too.
And remind us again how people can reach out if they want to.
My website is intrepidanimallearning.com, and you can find me I'm under that business name, Intrepid Animal Learning, on Facebook and Instagram. And the farm stuff is under Intrepid Acres on social media. And then my email address is support@intrepidanimallearning.com if you want to go straight to a message.
Well, this has been a lot of fun for me, Danielle. So from myself, on behalf of ATA, on behalf of everybody listening to this episode, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share a little bit about your journey with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.